Hey everyone, I'm Dr. Shayna Powell, naturopathic doctor and owner of West Elks Wellness. We're going to jump right in with my guest, Dr. Liz Carter, and we're just going to start. So, Dr. Liz, can you tell me a little bit about 5 elements acupuncture versus TCM? Just let's get into it.
Sure. Yeah. So in general, it's an interesting history. I'm going to try not to go too deep into it, just a little bite-sized chunk. But TCM is definitely the dominant form of Chinese medicine today in the US and in China. And it was actually born out of the Cultural Revolution in China in the 1950s and 60s. So what happened there is some of the medicine kind of got left behind because they wanted to Westernize it a little bit more, make it a little more quote unquote scientifically quantifiable. So that's kind of what we see as modern TCM. And then 5-element is also not traditional, which is interesting. It started in the 1970s, kind of in reaction to this loss of part of the medicine. So 5E really focuses on emotional and spirit-based health, whereas TCM is a little bit more physical. That's kind of the dividing line. TCM also has herbs and dietary recommendations in it, but it doesn't really get deep into the emotions. It recognizes the emotions, but it doesn't really give us a lot of pass inward with that. And that's kind of where 5E picks up the slack, is my understanding.
Okay, awesome. Yeah. And you know what, in naturopathic medicine, which both you and I are naturopathic doctors, we talk about the mind, body, and spirit. And one of my other guests that I had on previously, we talk about the mind and the body, and we don't even touch the spirit. It's like, yeah, you do whatever works best for you. When actually there is something that works. Generally, it's kind of like not necessarily a law, but like what works for most humans is generally the case. And do you find that to be true with 5 elements?
I think with 5 elements, that's kind of the beauty of it, where spirit is actually pretty well defined. And the difference between spirit in Western medicine and Chinese medicine, at least with 5 elements, is really interesting. A lot of spirit-based concerns, quote unquote, in Chinese medicine are actually kind of what we see characterized as mental illness in the US. So there is this big overlap, that when we are addressing mental and emotional health in naturopathic medicine, we are touching the spirit in Chinese medicine. We're just not really talking about it in those terms. And I think sometimes too, spirit, it can be a little bit triggering for people depending on, if they associate it with religion or whatever it is, so sometimes I just say emotions instead. Yeah.
Right. No, for sure. And in some of my podcasts, I've talked about, I grew up Baptist Christian, and it took me a long time to even be comfortable saying the word God without being triggered myself. So I totally understand that. And I like the point that you made, though, about a lot of diagnoses that we have in the United States that are mental health issues are maybe there's a different orientation we can have instead of pathologizing someone and saying, maybe this is a disorder, dis-ease of the society we choose to live in, rather than something else may be going on where they don't feel included. Or, something that is interesting is maybe people with the diagnosis schizophrenia, where they have hallucinations or psychosis, or whether it's auditory or visual hallucinations. I'm wondering, and again, this is pontification, I'm wondering if there's another layer to the universe that they are being able to relate to that you and I maybe don't relate to. And so then, is that a pathology? Well, maybe because the way we orient our society it is, but if we actually gave them space, what would that look like? Is that kind of what you see with 5 elements?
Right, for sure. Yeah, I think schizophrenia is a really great pull. That is specifically one of the issues I talk about, in that it is not a mental-based issue in Chinese medicine. That's more mind, cognition, reasoning. That is a spirit-based issue, for sure. And usually we see it more associated with fire element, though not always. So it can be this profound disconnection from self, because the fire element, that's their stress response, is disconnection. So our whole journey with the medicine and acupuncture is to bring them back into connection with themselves, and that might be a tendency of theirs. But Chinese medicine is all about balance. So it's not about making it, pathologizing it. It's more about yes, this is a tendency you have. If you get out of balance, let's see if we can balance your system and what that actually looks like for you.
Right. So but bringing things into balance, tendency towards, and I say this about myself, I have a tendency towards anxiety versus I have generalized anxiety disorder, right? It's like knowing that, and it tells me what I need to be doing, maybe better take care of myself. So 5 elements. We've got water, fire, air, metal, and earth.
Ooh, so close. Yeah. So the one you missed is wood.
Wood.
So and there's no air. So it's wood, fire, earth, metal, and water.
Got it. So kind of give me like a brief overview of each of those elements, because you mentioned fire oftentimes with a person that has a diagnosis of schizophrenia being kind of a little unbalanced. Kind of, what's the association with the different elements?
Yeah. So that's what's really interesting about the elements is that they relate to us, our personality, our emotions, and our physical health. So I can give you kind of a little snapshot. And then, of course, we can see them in nature, which is kind of awesome, where you can like look at a tree and learn more about yourself. So that's the wood element, so the traditional symbol of wood is bamboo. Bamboo is very strong, sturdy, incredibly robust, but also can be flexible in the wind when it needs to. If it's too brittle, it'll snap and break. That's kind of a metaphor for wood people. Wood people are and the wood element in general, very strong, robust, rooted, confident. It's all about growth and personal growth. And if it gets stuck, that's where they go into their emotion of anger. Irritation and frustration is where wood people go first. So that personal growth and individuation is very important for them. And they tend to be, again, really strong, confident individuals. They know who they are and they're fine dealing with that, saying it. They can lack a little bit of tact sometimes. They can be a little blunt. I would imagine you have some wood element. I'm not saying because of that. I
definitely vibe on that track for sure. When I've had friends diagnose or do TCM diagnosis, and then that tendency towards irritability. But again, I know that about myself, and I'm willing to own it. And that's a very wood element thing as well.
Yeah, which is amazing. Yes, absolutely. Other elements have a lot harder time. Like for me, for sure, I had a hard time accepting my own elements because I really didn't like parts of them, especially my earth element. So that was like a whole journey during school. But and then next on the cycle, so I'm going to talk about the elements in what's called the generating cycle. Okay. So, wood is first. Some people put water first because water is both the beginning and the end. I tend to put it at the end. But so wood generates fire, right? We can see that where when wood, it burns. So fire is kind of the characteristic is your spacey, artsy, creative friend that's like really loving and amazing when you see them in person, but they're a little sporadic and chaotic. If you think about fire in general, it's so warm and inviting, and people love to tell stories around a campfire. That's what it feels like to be around a fire person. You just feel loved. And that's at fire person's core. They want relationship and they want to feel worthy of love and to be loved, but they're often very scared of true intimacy. So they tend to keep relationships very superficial. Heart, small intestine, pericardium, which is heart protector in Chinese medicine. And then something called the sanjiao, which is essentially like circulation metabolism is associated with the fire element. In wood, it's liver and gallbladder are the associated organs. So fire is, you think about a fire, it doesn't have a lot of direction to it, right? It's kind of the opposite of wood. It's novelty and excitement and fun. And that's what they love to do. They're charming and comedians, and they just want to make people laugh, even if they're kind of sad. So, fire they're very lovely to be around. But if you are a more structured element like wood or metal, sometimes they can be a little chaotic. Next in the cycle is earth, right? We can see fire burns into earth. It creates ash. So earth is the stereotypical mother archetype. So if you have like big mom energy, you are likely an earth element. And that also, it can get when women have children or are in a very nurturing, caregiving role, anybody, that earth element comes forward. It just depends on, is that one of your core elements or not? It can be valuable to know all 5. So with earth, there's this receptivity, there's this nurturance. Earth is soil. So you think about it, it nourishes all plant life, right? And a healthy earth has this feeling of abundance and just really kind and compassionate. So their emotion is worry. So they get a little obsessive, they ruminate, they don't often have a very strong sense of self because they give so much to others. That's their first instinct. They're very other oriented. They're very community oriented. And then earth is the element that is most associated with our digestion. It's spleen and stomach. So I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit more as well. Metal is, that's a little hard to visualize. So metal is mineral or rock. So you can think about mountain. It's also precious metals, gemstones, and that plays right into metal element personality, and that their core issues around self-worth. Am I enough? Am I good enough? Am I worthy? Metal people are always searching for meaning. What is the deeper purpose here in my life? They're always mining for those precious gems of knowledge. So yeah, they tend to be structured. They like order. They can be perfectionists. They're kind of the stereotypical like analysis paralysis people. They get real overwhelmed with detail, and they're actually quite sensitive. Even though you think of like a mountain as very hard, there's a fragility to metal because they experience grief more deeply than any other element, and it kind of lives near the surface for them. So they often feel like they can kind of break apart or shatter. Yeah, and then last is water. Water, organs associated are kidney and bladder, which makes sense. Water is very deep, very powerful. It's really rooted in our survival. So the emotion associated with water is fear. So with that, you can have a lot of compassion for water people because their first emotional tendency is to live in fear. So they can be very big and powerful as a result because they're trying to protect themselves from fear, or they can kind of be very timid and shy. And kind of keep themselves away from the world, very kind of a little bit like alone. They often feel very misunderstood and a little kind of suspicious. They really struggle to trust around people for sure. But they're wonderful leaders. They're wonderful in emergency situations because they don't often get totally overwhelmed by their fear, where they can kind of hold it together more so than others. So that's kind of a little snapshot, I think, personality and organ-wise.
Would you say that everyone generally has various aspects of all of these elements, and maybe just some is a more natural disposition towards one or the other?
Yeah, it's such a good question. So yes, everybody has all 5 elements, just like the world has all 5 elements at all times, right? Because we, in 5 element especially, we are nature and nature is us. There's no separation between it. And then, so yeah, the metaphor for how earth and wood interact in nature is how they interact within our system. So in 5 element, there is the idea that we all have 2 out of the 5 that influence us the most. So we have a primary element and a secondary element, and those don't change over time. The primary element is inherited. The secondary element is usually learned between 2 and 5, likely due to a trauma response. And it's environmental. So whoever we're around kind of influences that development. But the hope is too that, as you grow and mature and invest in personal growth, you get more comfortable with the energy of all 5 elements, and you bring that natural balance into your system. Yeah.
So you used a word individuation. We're kind of getting a little on a tangent here, but I think it'll be all right. I studied a little bit of Jungian psychology, and one of the main points is to individuate. And as you grow and become, like you're individuating and becoming your own self. And there's 4 main archetypes. You have the warrior, the king, the queen, the magician, or the lover. And they're kind of opposing of each other, the warrior and lover and the king, queen, magician. And it's kind of the same, like we have a disposition towards one, and the others we need to learn how to integrate more appropriately. That way we're not living in our shadow aspects of ourselves. And it sounds somewhat similar here.
For sure. And I actually think I've seen some work with somebody using those archetypes and associating them with the elements. And I think they largely work. They don't totally, like they put water as the king, wood as the warrior, which totally fits, fire is the lover. And I don't remember the last 2. Yeah.
Interesting. Yeah. Always nice to make like some crossovers of different like cultural ways of orienting to the world. Okay, so let's kind of get into like the stomach. The way I know enough to know that I know not much at all about Chinese medicine, but enough that I understand that the earth aspect of the stomach and the wood aspect of the liver and gallbladder play a really big role when someone is dealing with chronic reflux. So I'm not talking about your bro that's like watching football, having too much beer and pizza, and they have reflux every once in a while. I'm talking about like, it's like a persona type that comes into my office, and I was this person, I will be first to admit it, with chronic heartburn that was awful no matter what I did. The meds, the diet change, and it really wasn't until I got to the emotional core of it that I was able to actually see it change and not need to be on a special diet, not need to be doing all of these things. I could just exist.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I think you nailed it there with, Earth. I usually think of Earth as one of the biggest issues, right? Because those are our digestive issues. But with the wood, there is this special relationship where if you look at the 5-element cycle, we talked about the generating, so we went around the circle. The 5-element cycle also has a star within it. So the star is the controlling cycle. So the idea is that the circle is a generating. So it's bringing more and more of that element. Fire creates earth, earth creates metal. And then controlling is the opposite, where you can see water controls fire, right? Mm-hmm. That's a pretty obvious one. Fire controls metal by melting it. Metal controls wood by chopping it. And wood controls earth. If wood overgrows, then the earth gets all bound up. And that's what we see. I think that's exactly probably what you are talking about there with that wood overacting on earth for sure, where earth is weak and wood is strong. And that can really lead to some digestive discomfort for sure.
Yeah, the way I kind of describe it is like the liver is a bully. And I mean, it's a big organ. Like it goes all the way over to the left nip. And like, that's not something like, unless you've taken anatomy, that you really understand that it's like, it's a huge organ. So when I say it bullies, that's kind of in line with, and that's from visceral manipulation is where I kind of got some of these like pieces. Yep. So when a person has like weak stomach is what I'm hearing there, like the overpowering piece is the wood element. Like, How do you see the emotional, spiritual aspect of this come into play and like help these people kind of unwind some of this overgrowth?
Yeah, I think when you said bully, that's such a great characterization. So some of the elements in 5-element, they're not only known as organs, the organs within an element, there's also officials. So the idea is with the officials, there is this persona that's associated with them. So wood, liver is the military general. That's what they are. They plan, they strategize, and then the gallbladder executes. They get shit done, right? So yes, so because wood is so self-assured and so confident, you have this very like tender, sweet, nurturing, receptive earth on the other side, right? Mm-hmm. So it's very easy for wood to kind of overpower earth. And I think especially in our culture, we have a very, in my opinion, water and wood heavy driven culture of like, go, do, succeed, step on whoever you need to get there. That's kind of a combo of wood and water. And we don't really have a culture that supports a lot of earth, which is this caring, kind, nurturing, everything's abundant, I have enough, I am enough, that kind of piece. So that's kind of a big emotional component to it that can be part of it. And then, I think getting into more of the earth kind of emotional aspect of reflux and heartburn, is this. So the stomach is, which is an organ of earth, is all about churning. It's supposed to rotten and ripen the food, right? So it's about breakdown. So we can look at that on a physical level, and then we can look at it on an emotional level. So if somebody's really caught in the churn, they're just ruminating on the same thing, that's a really good indication that their stomach is being overworked from a 5-element perspective. Yeah.
Like knots in my stomach, right? Like, and we even say that, like, oh, I've just got like such a knot in my stomach, I can't even think about eating.
Right, for sure. Yeah. And then emotionally as well, I ask people like, what can't you swallow right now that maybe you're being force fed, right? There's all of that. So, and what are you ruminating and obsessing over? So there's all these like easy ways in with that, with stomach. And spleen is a little different. It's about transformation and transportation. So it takes the chi from the food and makes it into chi that your body can use for energy, and then it transports it to the rest of your system. So it's like a fleet of delivery trucks. So if those delivery trucks are kind of broken down, the energy is not getting to the rest of your body where it needs to be. So yeah. So with spleen, it's very, very crucial. And spleen, each of the five elements has a taste associated with it. So the earth element is sweet. So with, yeah, so with spleen especially, it likes slightly sweet foods like pumpkin and oats and sweet potato, anything kind of that orange, brown, root vegetable kind of vibe. But if you do too much sweet, that damages the spleen and it creates dampness and it creates this inability for it to transport chi everywhere else. So mentally and emotionally, it's kind of like where do you need to find sweetness in your life? Where are you not finding abundance? Where are you giving too much and overextending yourself? Because that's the mothering, the nurturing archetype. So that's kind of the stuff I get into with people. Yeah.
Interesting. So I find this fascinating that we live in a country where like approximately 92% of people have some flavor of metabolic syndrome. And I usually associate that with eating too much sweets. And we're talking about like sweet potatoes and we're talking about winter squash, which are sweet, but there's also fiber and phytonutrients and other things. It's different than a bar of, a Nutrageous bar or a bag of M&Ms, right? Like that doesn't have fiber. There's no phytonutrients. There's nothing to kind of like balance out that sweetness. So that's curious then. This abundance of sweetness is actually damaging more people's stomachs than even just people that have this like wood, earth, elemental struggle within themselves. And then that puts damage on, okay, so what did I hear in school? You have liver stagnation and spleen chi deficiency. I feel like that is like the most common thing I heard from my acupuncture colleagues when I was in school. It's like student syndrome.
Yeah. Oh, that's totally accurate. Yeah. And those are probably by far the most common TCM diagnoses, in addition to like probably kidney chi deficiency, but especially for spleen chi deficiency in students, that's such a good point. They told us we all have it, but that's also because, at least in five element, I guess Western wise, we tend to think of digestion as just the food we bring in. So in Chinese medicine and five element, it is everything that you are bringing in. It's the information you're taking in. If you're working, it's the emotions that you are dealing with from yourself or others. It's the sensory input from the environment. So all of that really can overwhelm digestion very quickly. And that's what I said with students, you're just force-fed information. There's no way you can keep up. So your spleen is just like, it's like, I'm out. I can't do it.
And it's kind of like people now too. And like, I'm guilty of this. I was just doing this while I was getting prepared to come over here. It's like eating while I'm doing something else, eating while I'm playing a game, eating while I'm watching the news, eating when I'm making a cup of matcha, standing up, packing my bag to come here, which is what I was doing. It's like that has a negative impact, I'm hearing, then on the spleen.
Right. And the stomach, for sure. Yeah. It drains the earth element, which can already be a little taxed if you're in any sort of caregiving position.
Interesting.
Yeah. And I'd say, you don't have to do like a total information or sensory fast, but it is being thoughtful about choosing what you're exposing yourself to. Maybe it's light, maybe it's a comedy. In Chinese medicine, again, with that generating cycle, the fire element feeds the earth element. So if you're watching something funny like The Office and it's bringing you joy and laughter, or you're with a friend, that's actually helping your earth element to function. So I would bring in, some more of that if you can.
It's so funny. And I'm sure you see this in practice too. It's like, I have insomnia and I'm not digesting well and I'm kind of an anxious mess. And I'm like, oh, well, tell me about your bedtime routine, blah, 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 blah. And I'm watching true crime before bed.
Right.
And I'm like,
wild.
Well, wait a minute. Well, you're telling me you have anxiety and you're like paranoid about your neighbor breaking in. I'm like, have you tried just turning off true crime? And they're like, well, how that possibly can't be. And then they come back a couple weeks later and they're like, you're totally right. I'm not worried about every little crick and crack in my house being a mass murderer with an axe.
It's true. It's crazy. I know. Yeah. Yes. Yeah. I'd say the other piece about that, with overworking the digestion too is, which I'm sure you talk to people a lot about, is the not chewing enough. There's a saying in Chinese medicine, the stomach doesn't have teeth, right? So you're putting more work, or you're asking your earth element to do more work if it's already taxed. Like, take the time to just chew it.
Yeah. And the more sick people are, like the longer they've been chronically ill, the more I find that the more they need to chew. And I'm not saying you need to chew like for 3 hours on your piece of food, but man, can you cut your steak a little bit smaller so you don't have to spend 3 hours chewing it? That was a lesson I learned. And I just heard this from a patient yesterday. Well, yeah, I'm seeing undigested food. I'm like, okay, well, tell me about that. Oh, it's corn. Well, I ate corn and I'm not seeing that in my stool because I'm chewing my food properly. There's a difference between it's not digesting and you're seeing lettuce in your stool and you're seeing corn in your stool. And I have that like mindfulness conversation for sure. Chewing really matters. What's the fancy term for that? Mastication. And that's really, digestion starts prior to. It's when we're smelling our food, which a lot of us aren't doing anymore because we're microwaving it. So you microwave your food, then hopefully you're chewing it, but maybe not. And you're scrolling on TikTok or whatever your preference is, and you're swallowing your food. And before you even realize you're done and you didn't even like get mentally like satiated that you were eating. So like,
yes.
We're talking about like a physical thing that requires some mental and emotional fortitude.
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. Well, and I think, I think I just lost my train of thought. Goodness. Right. About earth with your point. You made a good point about, to me, I translated in my mind to appropriate nourishment. That is a huge theme in the earth element. And that is a big part of, to me, where sugar cravings come from, because earth often goes to food, because it is the mother archetype. Which is all about comfort and nourishment of others, and they really struggle to give it back to themselves. So the sugar cravings come in that food is just abundant. It's right there. We can shove it in our face, and it creates this feeling of nourishment, but it's not appropriate nourishment. It's not the nourishment we actually need. And that's another good place to reflect, is like, what am I actually looking for in this moment? You know, is it mental nourishment of just some downtime? Is it emotional, like I need a hug? Right. Just really, starting to think about that for yourself can help that earth element out too.
Mm-hmm. So, okay. Fire. I think of reflux and acid having to do with fire. So like thinking of, what is the term I'm looking for? Something rising. It is, I think, fire rising. Am I incorrect in that? That's
very close. So like the TCM diagnosis is stomach chi rebelling. So, but you're right, because the stomach likes a cool and moist environment. So we think about stomach chi rebelling with burping, nausea, acid reflux when the stomach gets too dry and too warm. So yes, fire, definitely a little bit of a fiery imbalance there.
Interesting that the stomach would be a more cool, moisture makes sense because of all the digestive enzymes, but I guess I thought in my mind, acid, a pH of 1 to 2, I always thought of it being kind of like aggressive, because I think, thinking back to chemistry class and hydrochloric acid projects, and it's always like kind of intense, but you're telling me that it's more moist and like cool. That's interesting.
It prefers a cool environment. And then your spleen is the opposite. It prefers warm and dry. So you have this balance between the two of them, but it can be quite challenging sometimes. Yep. Mm-hmm.
So that makes sense then, that why spicy foods would be irritating for people with reflux.
For sure, yeah, because it's already too much heat. Mm-hmm.
Interesting. So, okay, so nourishing things with the orange veggies, orange roots. So I'm going to say things like, this is why licorice root's really helpful for people with stomach stuff. I prescribe quite a bit of bitters, and bitters are definitely going to be more beneficial for that wood element. How does the bitters do? Because they cool the stomach then.
Yeah, so bitter, that's such a good question. This is what's really interesting as well. So the flavors that we were talking about with earth is sweet, fire's flavor is bitter. So, and the flavors are based on the controlling cycle. So you're seeing bitter as the fire because it cools fire. It will bring fire back into balance. So, and a lot of fire element people love bitter food. So it's a natural balance for sure.
And then with wood element, what's the flavor there?
Sour. Yep.
Sour. Oh, fascinating.
Mm-hmm. So that's where that like lemon in the water is great for moving liver chi, sauerkraut, all that good stuff. Yep.
Okay, that's very curious. So we're calming the fire by giving the bitter, but it's actually supporting digestion. You're saying that the spleen prefers warm. So what else can we do to support the spleen? Because, okay, we're talking a lot about like diet stuff here. What else? Like, is there like certain types of movement? You did also say like rest and like watching funny things. Like there's like some different pieces there to like add in. But how else can you see, the way I talk about it, let me formulate my question here. I see see a person that's a go type A, I see a lot of hiatal hernias in my practice. I very rarely see them in what the medical community says are the causes. Occasionally I'll see them in a formerly pregnant person. But I don't see a lot of large bodies, cigarette smoking individuals that come to my practice with a hiatal hernia. They're mostly thin framed like myself, and they are just like, I'm getting everything done today. I have a 300-page list. I will do everything on it today. And I'm like, oh, at the cost of what? So when you see that type of a person, what are some other things that might be valuable for them to start, again, unwinding that, like the liver bullying situation?
Yeah, with the liver. So liver, is really interesting. I would also say, in Chinese medicine, wood is related to connective tissue. So that can also be why we get this laxity in the connective tissue if the wood element is overdone, especially, with where the liver sits in Chinese medicine. It can and this from visceral manipulation, it can kind of lock up the diaphragm, right? So then we don't get proper movement. So speaking of which, the liver, the best medicine for the liver is movement, any type of movement, physical, mental, or emotional. Usually wood element people or people with an imbalance in wood element need more vigorous exercise. They got to break up that stagnation, whatever vigorous is for them. But usually there's a relief within the 10 to 15 minutes. That's also part of where the sour foods come in, is they really help to break up stagnation. And then mental and emotional, you need to identify what is irritating you, get to the bottom of that frustration. What is this impatience about, right? And then that can kind of start to slow things. That's also, water feeds wood. So the water element, even though when they're out of balance, they're really fear-based and adrenaline pumping kind of, adventure junkies. What water truly needs as medicine is rest, quiet, stillness, so much downtime, sleep. Water is the between birth and death stage. So it's that really calm, beautiful moment. So if you're nourishing water that way, that's also going to help balance wood. So, and you can do metal because metal controls wood. So there's so many different ways.
I was just going to say, the only element we really haven't touched on, some benefits or some characteristics in relation to the reflux, is the metal element, and that's lungs and large intestines. I like how you pose it like it's the mountain, it's the minerals, the pieces, but they're still brittle. So I think of things, again, the metal piece being a little more determined, but it's cold. So that's interesting.
Yeah, well, and metal, if we need to control wood because it's too strong, with metal foods are the taste is pungent. So it's garlic, ginger, onion, horseradish, all of those really intense foods, because they're very strong movers, and that helps to break up that liver chi stagnation as well. And then, metal can definitely, it can be pretty cutting. So that can stop a wood in its tracks. Sometimes they can be a little acerbic, a little sarcastic, intense. So, but there's also, with metal, there's a meticulousness and a slowness, and wood hates that. They're impatient. They want to make decisions. They just want to go, Yep. So I'm metal and I have a wood husband. So that's a real interesting negotiation, where he's just like, make a decision, and I'm just like, but it has to be kind of perfect. Because for me, I'm more sensitive. So those consequences of making a decision and rushing are a bigger deal. Whereas for him, he's like, whatever, I'm going to pick up the pieces. He's just very robust, So it's kind of like that internally as well. With that metal, they also like a lot of space to process and alone time. Metal is all about creating beauty in the world. So that can be a big part of it as well. So and then again, that search for meaning, that deeper purpose, that wisdom, that also slows wood down quite a bit, right? You have to really go inward. That's the movement of metal is inward. So it's spending a lot of time with yourself in reflection, thought, and then you get some clarity. And again, you find those precious gems within yourself to figure out. So I'd say, that's good metal medicine overall. Yeah.
Is it earth that feeds metal?
Yes.
So then any of the stomach supportive things that we've talked about, like the orange, the moisturizing veggies, those are going to also be beneficial for the metal element as well.
Right. And this is the beautiful thing about the five element system is because everything's connected. A lot of people get really hung up on like, oh my gosh, which element am I and which one do I need to treat? And the reality is that if you start balancing any one of them,
Yeah.
especially if there's one that appeals to you, it's going to benefit the whole system. You're going to change the balance of elements and it's going to be great. And then you'll have some more places to go after that. It'll become clear.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. One step at a time. And, when people are like, oh, I want hormone balancing, I'm like, what hormones? Let's talk about that. And it's like, usually they're talking about the cholesterol base bones, but it's like in my mind, and I realized this when I was a student, it's like, if we have one hormone that's out of place, all the rest of them are going to be functioning in relation to that as well. So we start adjusting our cortisol, our melatonin and daytime scheduling. It's going to have an effect on all the rest of our hormones just by the nature of re-regulating the system. And that's what I'm hearing here too. We start paying attention and being a little more mindful and inward of ourselves and just like choosing to go a little bit slower. One of the things that's been helpful for me is go a half step slower. Like really balancing that wood aspect of myself. Okay, so spleen. Spleen is interesting because in conventional medicine, or I don't know, like conventional anatomy, we talk about the spleen being like the place of our immune system. And it's like we recycle our red blood cells, but also it makes part of our immune system. And that actually is in relation a little bit to what you said. It's like our circulation. It's kind of our packing and shipping center. That's totally, that makes sense actually. I just realized that. That's great. What other pieces of this are we missing that we haven't touched on yet that you'd like to share?
Yeah, I would say with a little more mental and emotional about the earth element itself to kind of like rebuild that weak earth, because we talked about the foods and then mentally and emotionally, earth is that overworked caregiver. And the hardest thing for an earth person or somebody with an earth element out of balance is to give back to themselves. So I think realizing that that's the hardest thing to do, but starting to work towards it is really important. And I think there can be really healthy ways to do that, where if you are just able to take a little bit of time for yourself, if you're able to cook for yourself, earth is it's very food oriented. So cooking for yourself and others can be really helpful. Try to be willing to accept help, because that's what earth does too, is that they're kind of like, I heard it described once in a book as like the stereotypical Jewish mother who just gives and gives and gives and gives. And then people who like want to give back, she's like, oh no, that's earth. Like they reject care when it's given. And they have this internal barometer where they have this piece that they get really resentful and unsympathetic because they're like, no one can care for me as well as I care for others. And they get bitter about it. And you know what? That is true, because they are the only ones that can care the best for themselves, but they do not want that job. They have a very hard time accepting their own needs and being their own person and their own individual. So really working on finding that sense of self can be really core for that earth element if it's not well developed. So yeah, I think that's part of what I wanted to say about earth. Yeah.
That's it's definitely making me think of someone who I'm very close with, and I hope that I can help them help themselves. How about that? Because it's like you're speaking so much to like a core wound that so many people have of like the helpers, the doers, for others. And then when you say, hey, like, what about yourself? They're like, no, exactly like what you said. Like, I don't need any help. I'm fine. But you're telling me you're not feeling well and like all these things. No, I'm fine. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, I think because, I'm secondary earth, and having a wood husband has been really good medicine for me in that way, in that I see how strong of an identity he has and how confident he has. And I'm like, God, can I do that? It's like he's a really good role model for that. And I would just say, with earth people, wood is really action focused. Like, what can I do? How can I help? How can I fix? Earth needs to be heard. They are oral processors. They have to have their story told, and they will tell you the same story over and over and over and over and over again. That's part of the rumination and worry and obsession until they feel heard. So usually with earth, it's all about compassion and empathy, and not pushing for action. Usually with the push, they go into their stress response of collapsing. They just like puddle and they're like, I'll do whatever you want, because that's less stressful for them than having a strong sense of self until they get a little bit better at it, because that's how they manage conflict. They want everybody to be harmonious. Like Earth's, their ideal is the end of a Disney movie. Everything is wrapped up. Everybody's happy. Everything's perfect. Like that's what they want the world to be like, So it can be a little bit like there's a lot of gentleness, and it can be very tough because they do need to move forward. But Earth people, they can be very like stuck in the mud, right? That's literal Earth. They can take a very long time to change. So it's an exercise in patience sometimes, for sure. Yep. Yeah. But they have to find it themselves. They have to find the path, right? Which is, it's a lot of work. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I am hearing you that the person needs to be heard. So this is my husband I'm thinking about, and like so action oriented, and like sure that this is this is A, B, C, and D. Just do those things and everything will be fine. And I'm seeing how that is not helpful, but also that's like the humbling aspect of learning like the constitutional components of being a human. Like we're all a little bit different, and my way works well enough for me, and I have foot and mouth syndrome every once in a while, and I'm okay with that, but I understand that does not work for everyone, and some people don't feel comfortable being wrong, or they just process things a little bit different, or they move a little slower, or I move too fast, or whatever the case may be. And that's why it's so helpful. I learned constitutions first from an Ayurvedic perspective, and I was like, oh my God, this makes the world make so much sense. Why there's like different shapes and sizes, and like we have front defensive linemen, and we have the like really tall running football players. Sorry, I don't play football. I don't watch football. I just know that like there's the defensive people, and they're usually like really buff, and like they will probably knock both of you and I over, although I haven't met you in real life.
Yeah. Yes. No. Yeah. That would be effective. Yeah. I think for Earth people, like, I've heard when you're interacting and trying to help, it's like, do you want solutions or support? Exactly. They will choose support 100 times out of 100. That's where they need to start. And then they can hear whatever else you're saying. It's just, if that empathy isn't offered up front, they are still so focused on getting the empathy that sometimes it's a little tough. But, yeah, I'm with you. That's why I love the 5 elements too. The constitutional, it's just such a wonderful map for yourself and then for everyone else in the world too. It's great.
Mm-hmm. And so just so our guests maybe understand constitutions, like that is how we show up in the world. It's our tendencies, it's our weaknesses, it's our strengths, it's our natural dispositions. It's like, why do some people get lung issues when they get sick versus some people get sore throats? Why do some people tend towards constipation or diarrhea? Like those are our constitutional dispositions. Anything you'd like to add, or like a different perspective, Liz?
Oh, no, I think you nailed it. Yeah, for sure. And I think maybe just, that it's mental, emotional, and physical, right?
Thank you.
Yeah. So it's such a wonderful map to the world.
Mm-hmm. And again, a different way of orienting rather than pathologizing our dis-eases. We say, hey, we have a tendency towards, we don't have to own, we just know that these are parts of ourselves. And the more we get comfortable understanding our own individual constitutions, the more that we can easily move through the world without maybe needing to label whatever it is. And in this very label heavy society, I am being mindful of the words I choose to use, but I think you are catching what I'm saying. And anything else, Liz?
I mean, I feel like we really covered a lot of it. Yeah. I mean, this is really fun. It's a great conversation.
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate you joining me. If my listeners want to reach out to you, where's best place for them to find you?
Yeah, you can find me on Instagram. I'm Dr. Liz Carter. So it's Dr. Liz Carter. That's probably the easiest. I'm on there the most. I'm also on Facebook and TikTok. And then, I have an educational website as well it's just drlizcarter.com. You can email me from there. You can check out my blogs. Yeah.
Dr. Liz has a great newsletter that I subscribe to. I don't know how you do all the things you do, but you do a fantastic job. Really good education and really providing good naturopathic like ways to take care of yourself, which I am so grateful for people like you that are able to kind of put out some good content like that. And for everyone else, if you like this podcast, subscribe. That's the best way that you can help support me. Also, you can see here my product line. I've got a product line called Wild Iola made with tallow. They are scent free, although I do have some that are herbally infused. I am moving away from the essential oils. So if you're curious and you want to try out some tallow products that are unscented, great for your skin, wildiola.com, IOLA. And as always, share with a friend, or if you found this controversial, drop a comment and let's chat. Thanks so much.